The NL Central as a division has changed a ton from what we know it as in the 2024 season. Where do the Pirates fit in this division that has the potential to be a tight race?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to literally everything that you can find on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Because, folks, you know, it's actually kind of nice to have the Pittsburgh Pirates almost back. They're almost back, folks, and we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there. And eventually, we're going to be talking about spring training. That's going to be in a couple of weeks. But for now, we're kind of doing an outlook on the NL Central, because the NL Central as a division looks really interesting this year. And it's a division that I have said on this show plenty of times that I think is very winnable. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Make sure you go to Game Time right now to get tickets to your next comedy show, your next Penguins game, your next theater event. You want to go do that over at Game Time. And make sure you use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. So the NL Central, we know the teams, the Reds, the Pirates, the Brewers, who have been kind of the thorn in everybody's side in said division. And then you, of course, have the Cubs and the Cardinals. The Pittsburgh Pirates last year were 25-27 against the division. It was a division that was, for the most part, pretty tight. And the Brewers really running away with it was in due part to the fact that they pretty much just performed better against everybody else than everybody else in the division. And when you look at this division and what it's looked like over the last couple of years, it's pretty much been Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Chicago. More so Milwaukee than any other team, because Milwaukee right now has just had a marvelous time just getting rid of talent and then finding more talent. That's just kind of been the MO of that Brewers team. And for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I would even throw the Reds in here. You guys probably watched the show yesterday that I did with Stephen Offenbaker and Jeff Carr of Locked on Reds. It's kind of just been, how do we get over the hump? And when you're trying to figure out the role that the Pirates are going to play in this division in 2025, a lot of it hinges on where the improvements come for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. And as far as the NL Central is concerned, there's arguments to be made for the Pittsburgh Pirates having the best players at certain positions in this division. I mean, you look at Brian Reynolds in the corner outfield alongside the likes of Jackson Chourio and Kyle Tucker. Obviously, we're going to talk about some important additions and departures in this division in the second part of the show. But Brian Reynolds has a case to be one of, if not the best outfielder in the division. Then you consider the starting pitching staff that features Paul Skeens and Jared Jones and Mitch Keller and Bailey Falter. And then, of course, eventually the likes of Mike Burrows and Braxton Ashcraft and potentially a Bubba Chandler. I think that group goes hand in hand, if not above all else, everybody in the division. So the Pirates have some bright spots as far as just the division is concerned when you're considering where these players are going to eventually fit into the whole mold. But for the Pirates, and I said this on the show yesterday, the biggest thing that they are trying to do in 2025 is break through that barrier that they haven't really been able to break through in this division since 2015. Yeah, the 2018 season, they kind of did it, but they really have not been able to break that upper echelon of this division for some time. And that's kind of the goal that they have to have in mind in 2025, because this is a division that you look up and down and you say, okay, the Brewers, as of right now, it's hard to say that they're not the class of the division, because they just have been for the past half decade. Then you have kind of what the Cubs have done this offseason, and you expect the Cubs to be a little bit better than what they were last year, because everybody kind of picked them to win the division last year by default when they got Craig Counsell and kind of kept everybody together. Then you have the St. Louis Cardinals, who to me are in kind of a limbo state because of certain things that have happened this offseason and really the lack thereof of the additions that they've made. And then you have the Cincinnati Reds, who made probably one of the bigger moves in the division this year in adding Terry Francona as their manager, while also still having the problem that the Pirates have had, where they haven't really been able to upgrade their roster as much as I think that they would have liked to. So you take all of this into account and you ask yourself, where do the Pirates fit in? Folks, I'm going to be just straight up honest with you. I could see this Pirates team being first in this division as easily as I could see the Pirates be last in this division. That's truly how close I think this division has the potential to be in 2025. Because if the starting pitching staff is just lights out, like a lot of us potentially expect it to be, like with this pitching staff being the absolute strength of this roster, if the starting pitching staff just takes over and the bullpen, and we talked about player improvements last week, if the bullpen can just be an average group and the offense can get out of that bottom 10 or even at least into the low teens, high 20s as far as production, folks, that's really the recipe for success for this Pirates team. Now, you would obviously like the offense to take a substantial step forward. You would like the bullpen to take a substantial step forward, but you also want to take the baby steps that are necessary when you have a starting pitching staff that is going to be your strength no matter what. So for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, for that to happen, yeah, you want to see guys like Henry Davis and Jack Sawinski really break out. You kind of want to see that from Endy Rodriguez. You want to potentially see a Termar Johnson make his debut. You want to see the middle infield continue to grow together with Nick Gonzalez and Jared Triolo and potentially a Liover Peguero. Isaiah Connor-Falefa, can he have a repeat of the best offensive season that he ever had? And when you consider all this just in the division, I'm not talking about how the Pirates stack up against the Dodgers and the Padres and the Diamondbacks and the Braves and the Phillies and the Mets. We're just keeping it in the division. I think the Pirates, not even due in part to the lack of what they've done this offseason, are a team that can compete in this division. The starting pitching staff alone gives me that feeling. Because if Paul Skeens is an all-star again, which we all fully expect him to be, if Jared Jones takes that extra step instead of taking a step back during his sophomore season, it's hard to imagine that starting pitching staff can't carry this team to 80-something wins. I think they can, especially if what happens, or what I said could happen, happens, where the offense takes a little bit of a step forward and the bullpen is just an average unit. If David Bednar can return to his all-star form, great, your ceiling gets higher. If Colin Holderman can return to almost leading the league in holds a few years ago, then your ceiling gets higher. If Key Brian Hayes can stay healthy and hit 250, your ceiling gets higher. All with the starting pitching staff that, yes, I know you can bring up injuries. Yes, I know you can bring up that Jared Jones might have the sophomore slump. Yes, I know that we brought up Mitch Keller's inconsistencies on this show in the second half of seasons. All of that factors into this. But then you also consider that Johan Oviedo will be back. You're going to have Mike Burrows and Braxton Ashcraft as options in this starting rotation. Bailey Falter's still in the mix here too. So you consider all of this and you say, the starting pitching staff is an absolute. What other teams in the division can say that? Milwaukee, maybe. Cincinnati, yeah, with Hunter Green, Lodolo, and all those guys. But there's injury history there. And St. Louis and Chicago, I don't think can absolutely say great things about their starting rotation outside of, Sonny Gray and Shoto Imanaga. So the Pirates have the one up there. And it's arguably one of the biggest ones that the team could have, because the offenses around the division are just going to probably be better than the Pirates. So they're going to have to take those steps forward offensively, because you have teams like Chicago that are going to hit the baseball. You have teams like the Brewers that are going to hit the baseball with Jackson Chourio and Andrew Monasterio and all of those players, and Sal Frelick and all those guys. Even Cincinnati with Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McLean and CSN and the addition of Gavin Lux, which we'll talk about in a minute. you look at all of these things and all of these factors, but to me, none of them really pushed any team above the edge. None of them did. And yeah, there's arguments to be made that the Cubs got better and that the Cardinals got worse and Cincinnati got better by addition and the Pirates have kind of just stayed the same. But if the Pirates can just get minor improvements, I'm not talking about drastic, major improvements where the bullpen is a top 10 unit and the offense is a top unit in baseball. They don't even need that to be competitive in this division and have a shot. That's the scary part of all this, is that the Pirates can go out and get an outfielder. If they can go out and get another bullpen arm, I think they position themselves well in this division because I just think it's a division that's very winnable. Now, obviously, again, and I've said it, Milwaukee and Chicago are probably going to be the two teams that are going to be fending for this division the most. But how do the Pirates break through? They have to get some offensive production, and they have to have a bullpen that isn't giving games away. If they could do that and flip the script on what their NL Central record was last year of 25-27 and just add 5 wins to that, then I like their chances. And throughout the division, there were a lot of important additions as well as important departures. We're going to look all around the NL Central and talk about these additions and departures and just how they impact things next on Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply because attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. Folks, I went to a Steelers playoff game way back when, but all I remember is just how palpable the crowd was, how everybody was on their toes the entire time, and you could feel that too at any sports event, at any event. Because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I recently used Game Time Picks to find tickets for an upcoming Pitt basketball game. Browsing through the deals was simple, and I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The super deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me a sure peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. And download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. After making this your first listen of the day, make sure you listen to Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. He's going to be bringing you all of your news and everything you need to know about spring training, the remainder of the offseason, and everything else under the MLB umbrella as the 2025 season approaches in late March. I was going to say early March, but late March is when we'll get regular season baseball. Obviously, tons of spring training before that. So it's going to be a fun time. And that's truly what I think the NL Central is going to be this year. I think it's going to be a very fun division to watch in 2025, in due part because of a lot of important additions and a lot of important departures. And when you're talking about additions to this division, it's very, very hard not to start with Terry Francona, who we talked about yesterday being the biggest difference between this Pittsburgh Pirates team and the Cincinnati Reds because of the track record that Tito comes with. I mean, Francona goes into an organization in Cincinnati that, like Pittsburgh, is trying to push over that hump in this division. And Francona has a track record of doing that across his time in Major League Baseball. He's one of the better managers to ever do it. He's going to come into a team that is talented with the likes of Ellie De La Cruz and Gavin Lux, who was one of their big offseason additions. And then you look at TJ Friedel and you look at Matt McClain and all these other players, Hunter Green, Nicola Dolo, Braxton Ashcraft, or not Braxton Ashcraft, the other Ashcraft that they have. And then you look at the potential that they get Carlos Estevez as a bullpen option. And what a lot of Reds fans were telling me after the show that I did yesterday is that they just have a feeling that unlike David Bell, Terry Francona is going to take this team by the reins, and he's going to find a way to, one, let this bullpen work a lot better. His lineup management's going to be a lot better, and overall the product is probably going to be a lot better. So much like last season, in this division, there was a big managerial hire. Now, obviously, last year, that was, of course, Craig Counsell leaving the Milwaukee Brewers to become the manager of the Chicago Cubs. And that kind of just shook this whole division at its core. And that's what kind of made Chicago the early front runner to win the division. Now, obviously, that didn't happen, but that's what made them the front runner. And you go to that Chicago team, and they've been an interesting team to monitor this offseason because a lot of people kind of knew that Cody Bellinger was on his way out, and he was a massive departure from this division because Cody Bellinger was a very good player with the Chicago Cubs before heading to the New York Yankees. And a lot of people expected that. I mean, a lot of people knew that Cody Bellinger was going to be gone. They expected even potentially a Seiya Suzuki or an Ian Happ trade at some point. Now, Ian Happ, of course, has a no trade clause, or I believe a no trade clause, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. But you look at what Chicago was able to do additions-wise. They go out and replace Cody Bellinger with Kyle Tucker, who, yeah, that's a massive addition to the division. He comes over from the Houston Astros, and then they weren't done with the Houston Astros. They go out and get Ryan Presley as a closer from the Houston Astros just very recently. So the Chicago Cubs last season were a team that when you did like an all NL Central team, you kind of picked a lot of Cubs like Nico Horner, Seiya Suzuki, Cody Bellinger, Shoto Imanaga was on that list for quite some time. And you look at that and you say, okay, well, yeah, let's go get Kyle Tucker. Let's go get Ryan Presley. Let's make this team better around Craig Counsell. Now, I do think that the starting pitching staff is still a massive question, and there was small rumors going into the offseason that Chicago could be, could be involved in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. They were not, but they make some big additions. I mean, I think Kyle Tucker and Ryan Presley come in and are immediately massive contributors to that team. Kyle Tucker in Wrigley Field will probably do numbers. Ryan Presley as a closer for that bullpen will hopefully have some success for that team. Not for Pirates fans, but that's what the Chicago Cubs fans expect. And then you move to Milwaukee, and that was where you start to get to the departure territory because, yeah, we talked about Cody Bellinger leaving, but you get to departure territory because then you start saying, okay, the Milwaukee Brewers have this knack for watching talent walk out the door or moving on from it and still managing to win ball games. And they're going to have to stand that test of time again because they lose Devin Williams and they lose Willy Adames. Of course, Willy Adames heads out to San Francisco on a massive contract early in the offseason to become the new shortstop of the San Francisco Giants. And of course, I believe Devin Williams went to the New York Yankees. There's been a lot actually that's happened this offseason, not in Pirates land, but I believe Devin Williams is now a New York Yankee. Yes, he did get moved to the New York Yankees. So that's where the questions start to arise with Milwaukee now is what kind of team is Milwaukee without Devin Williams in the back end of that bullpen? What kind of team is Milwaukee without Willy Adames spearheading that offense like he tended to do very often alongside William Contreras and then, of course, the emerging Jackson Chourio and Christian Yelich. So they still have some offensive weapons, but losing Adames could prove to be pretty big for that Milwaukee Brewers team. So that had to be one of the bigger departures in this division was Willy Adames and Devin Williams both leaving the Brewers. And then sticking with departures and ending on this topic, the St. Louis Cardinals have kind of just been a weird team this offseason. It doesn't feel like they have any direction at this current moment, just from the outside looking in. And Paul Goldschmidt, of course, leaves to go to New York. Kind of expected that. Nobody really expected the St. Louis Cardinals to hold on to Paul Goldschmidt anymore, which then, of course, sparked the Nolan Arenado trade conversation that has since fizzled out because it felt like Nolan Arenado and the Boston Red Sox were just kind of like destined to be a pairing at some point, and then it just kind of fizzled out. And then the Red Sox were interested in Alex Bregman, and now Nolan Arenado is just kind of in this weird purgatory where he doesn't know what kind of season he's really going to have because he's still a St. Louis Cardinal. And with losing Goldschmidt, I would think that the Cardinals would want to go with a more youth movement approach with guys like Mason Wynn. And they just haven't done that yet. And there's not much that the Cardinals have really done this offseason, and it's kind of odd because usually the Cardinals are players in this in these markets for these players like a Pete Alonso and an Alex Bregman and a Christian Walker and those players that were all signed throughout the offseason. Usually the Cardinals are involved in this, and they just haven't been involved in it. So you just look all around, and then, of course, we all know the Pirates' departures and their additions with Aroldis Chapman heading to Boston and then bringing in Spencer Horwitz. There's just been a lot of movement. But like I said at the top, I just don't think this movement has really pushed any given team any further away from the pack. Now, like, I still just don't think that there's that one team in the division that you look at as the clear-cut favorite because Milwaukee has been that team right now for the last couple of years, but they lose Devin Williams and Willy Adames. So does their luck run out with losing these players? Then you have Chicago, of course, again, add Ryan Presley and Kyle Tucker. Can Craig Counsell push that team over the edge? Obviously, the Reds, as I mentioned, get Tito, Terry Francona. Can he push the Reds over the edge? That's kind of what all of these teams are trying to do in this division is push themselves over the edge. The Brewers have been able to do that. The Cardinals have been able to do that in the past. The Cubs have even been able to do that at times. But some team is going to do it. And there's going to be a lot of storylines that are going to play a big part in who wins this division. What are the biggest storylines for each of these teams in the division, including the Pittsburgh Pirates? We'll discuss in a moment. And welcome, everybody, to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Again, make sure you follow this show on all of your favorite audio platforms and, of course, on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan and at Locked On Pirates because, of course, throughout the 2025 campaign, we're going to be talking all about these storylines that are going to define the NL Central. And for starters, I really think, again, going back to the show that we did yesterday, just how much of an impact is Terry Francona going to have on this Reds team? I think the Reds are a team to watch. They're kind of the wild card of this bunch because you look at this team and what Francona is taking in, obviously getting Elly De La Cruz, I think a big storyline as well as just how much better can Elly De La Cruz get at this rate? How much better can Elly De La Cruz continue to be? I think that's a massive part of this in this division as well is can Elly De La Cruz become one of the best players in baseball? I mean, he's already in the conversation, I think, a little bit, and Francona, of course, is going to have him at his fingertips at any given moment to use. So I think that's a massive storyline. You look at the Milwaukee Brewers, I kind of already talked about it at length, but losing Willy Adames and Devin Williams, can the Milwaukee Brewers remain the class of the NL Central? Can they remain at the top of this division despite losing two very good players in Willy Adames and Devin Williams? Can they continue to just mold the cycle and make the cycle theirs? I mean, it's been kind of just the Milwaukee Brewers way of winning is, oh, well, we lost this player. Okay, we're just going to get better. Oh, we lose Josh Hader. Yeah, we're just going to get better. Oh, we lost Corbin Burns. Yeah, we're just going to get better. So I think that's a massive storyline. Then you head to Chicago. Craig Counsell in his second season with the Chicago Cubs. obviously going to have Kyle Tucker at his disposal now, a very talented offense. You heard me mention some of it earlier with Nico Horner and Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ, Kyle Tucker. Even with the departure of Cody Bellinger, I think it is the best offense in the division. Maybe Cincinnati has something to say about that, or Milwaukee. But I do think Chicago is a big storyline for this division as well. Can Craig Counsell kind of get his fingertips on that club a little bit more than what he was able to do in 2024? And Kyle Tucker, can he fully replace Cody Bellinger? And on top of that, can he even exceed Cody Bellinger? I think he absolutely can, but it has to be a talking point in this division now that Kyle Tucker is kind of the face of that Chicago Cubs offense. Then with the St. Louis Cardinals, the youth movement is kind of officially on. If you look at the St. Louis Cardinals right now, and they're a unit that, they're kind of just relying on guys like Mason Wynn and the other youngsters that are on that team. For the first time in a very long time, the St. Louis Cardinals are not built like the best team in the division. They're not built to be a competitor. They're not built to be really much more than a 78 to 80 something win team, maybe at their ceiling. But if some of those young guys like Mason Wynn continue to take those steps in maturity and continue to take those steps forward, the St. Louis Cardinals could be a surprising team. And then when we get to our Pittsburgh Pirates, is Derek Shelton ever going to get over the hump of a losing season? I think that has to be one of the biggest storylines that the Pirates are going to have throughout the entirety of their campaign. Derek Shelton has been the face of scrutiny since the end of last year, obviously with another season where the Pirates obviously lose again. And then on top of that, he had another streak where he lost 10 games in a row. So all eyes are going to be on Derek Shelton now and what he can do with this Pirates roster, because as I've said before on this show, I do think this is put up or shut up time for this regime, that being Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton and all the coaches that have come along with the ride. And really for the Pirates too, just how much better can Paul Skeens get? Is he going to be the starter in the All-Star game again? Can he compete for a Cy Young Award? Can O'Neal Cruz fulfill his ceiling and be a 25-25 or even a 30-30 player as a center fielder? I think that's another massive storyline that we can watch. And then just from the Pirates standpoint, are some of these offensive guys that are young, like a Jack Sawinski, like a Henry Davis, like an Endy Rodriguez, are they finally going to take that next step and become valuable major league players? Not just guys that are getting a chance because of their age and because of circumstance, but because they're actually really playing well. That's what the Pirates need from guys like Henry Davis and Jack and Endy Rodriguez, and I'd even argue a Jared Triolo and a Nick Gonzalez. They need to get production from some more of these younger offensive prospects that they've put a lot of time and effort into. And if that can happen, I think the Pirates could end up being right in the mix in this NL Central. I think this NL Central just has endless storylines. I think it is a very, very winnable division. And you look at just the departures and the additions and where the Pirates fit into all this and where every team fits into all this. And I think you could make an argument realistically for almost every team in this division to compete in some way for the division title in 2025. And that's what makes this division so fascinating to me, is that any of these teams, to me, could finish in fifth, and any of these teams could finish at the top of this division. But we're just going to have to wait and see it play out. We're going to have to wait and see just how awesome this division is going to be. And we're going to have to wait and see if the Pirates are finally going to become a real competitor in this division. But that's a 2025 NL Central outlook. Of course, closer to the season, we'll have our annual NL Central roundtable with all the hosts of the Locked On NL Central channels. So make sure you go follow Locked On Reds, Locked On Brewers, Locked On Cardinals, and Locked On Cubs for all of your know your enemy stuff that you would love to do. And of course, that you're here, make sure you follow Locked On Pirates if you're already not. Like, subscribe, comment, and share it with your friends, because it's available on YouTube and all of your favorite audio platforms. You can find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. My name is Ethan Smith, your host, who, has a lot of fun on this show. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in on this Tuesday morning and afternoon, or whenever you're listening. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, we'll see you on the flip side.